I appreciate when Jagex shares exact release dates for new content, but sometimes their roadmaps reveal unexpected changes to the game, and that's exactly what we'll be diving into with May's roadmap. So whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Roadmap-wise, May does have an exciting update to look forward to, namely the new invention-related content for both runecrafting and thieving. On that same day, being the 12th of May, Jagex is also releasing the so-called Game Health Update. Now, this Game Health update was first mentioned back in a RuneScape roadmap check-in in August 2024. In this post, Jagex mentions skilling becoming increasingly less competitive profitability-wise or income-wise compared to bossing, and they would be dedicating a content-sized project towards addressing this, either by introducing new content or by taking an extensive look at balancing some of the existing content. Here's what I mentioned at the time when covering that exact news. And you know what that means? Decreased bossing common profitability, or well, that's what I would expect after the Garden of Carid update, which removed all herb drops from bosses, and a lot of Slayer creatures drops were nerfed as well. And guess what? Spoiler alert, that's exactly what they're doing, to no one's surprise, at least not to mine. So let's get into the words of the developers and of Jagex here and see what they have to say about this nerf. When we first began exploring an update focused specifically on profitability, we took a step back to evaluate the broader state of the RuneScape economy. While we're always keeping an eye on the ebb and flow wealth generation across the game, one trend that has become increasingly clear is the Elder God Wars bosses are a significant outlier, particularly when it comes to their common loot pool. Their consistent value has raised the bar for bossing revenue, and as a result, we'll be making targeted adjustments to some of these loot tables on May 12. We know that economic changes like this aren't always welcome news, but these kinds of updates are vital for the long-term health and sustainability of the game. We're focused on creating a balanced, rewarding experience for everyone, and that means addressing areas where systems are no longer functioning as intended. Now, I have a very strong opinion about what they're saying here, but we're going to skip to what the nerfs actually are before I share my opinion, okay? So, Archgalasaur. That's the first boss on the chopping block. The normal loot has been nerfed by approximately 45 to 60%, and this also includes charm drops. I don't know why they're nerfing charms here. Yes, the Archgalasaur is a really good AFK-able way of collecting a bunch of crimsons and blues, so some nerf to the charms is acceptable and kind of justifiable, but it has nothing to do with skilling profitability, so why is it also being reduced? In hard mode, the average value of common drops will be reduced by about 10 to 30%, and I expect that to be different depending on your enrage. Carapac will receive a 30 to 35% nerf to its common loot drops value, on average, and in hard mode, a reduction of 8 to 10%. Zamrak? Wait, hold on a second. Zamrak's getting nerfed again? And not just a little nerf. Its average quantity of common loot drops is being reduced by about 50 to 60%. And that's on top of the nerf it gained back in July 2022, where they reduced the value of the common drops and increased the value if you completed a full elite dungeon. You know, the dungeon you do before it called the Zamraki Undercity. At the time, it was changed to incentivize you to complete the full dungeon in addition to the increased rare drop chance, but unless you were going for slivers, no one really did that dungeon anyway. It makes way more sense to just do Zamrak, especially after they gave you the shortcut after completing the dungeon only once. No one did that dungeon, let's be honest. Perhaps if you're an Iron Man player you would, but mainscape accounts, you would be better off just farming the boss. And here comes the shocker. In addition to nerfing Zamrak, they're just going to absolutely obliterate the amount of salvage you get from completing the dungeon itself, therefore reducing the common GP you gain. I mean, they're reducing the salvage quantity by 50%. They're literally cutting it in half. That's an insanely harsh nerf. Okay, let's continue. Wilderness Flash Event reward bags. Reduction in salvage, bones, ashes, magic logs, and criminal bolts. Okay, you'll be able to get less. They might become a little bit more expensive. They've replaced Necronian salvage or Calcum salvage. Okay. A slightly improved chance for the Dark Onyx core, weapons, and roller gloves. So the rares. But for f***'s sake, Jagex, can you please mention a percentage here? What does slightly improved chance mean? What does that mean? How is that gonna, is it a 5% increase? Is it a 1% increase? I'm guessing this post was shared to inform the players and gauge their reactions to the upcoming update, possibly adjusting the nerfs based on the overall feedback. But can you please be more clear and defined when you're talking about substantial nerfs like these? It's oddly weird to see a post like this be so inconsistent. I mean, look at the Araxia changes. Reduced the average quantity of salvage loot drops. Reduced the average quantity of other common loot drops. Is it 10%? Is it approximately 50%? It probably is based on the other ones, but I don't know, I can guess. That doesn't really help me shape an opinion about this update or upcoming change to the game. Besides, Raksha does not need a common loot nerf. The common loot sucks already, the rares are rare, there's no bad luck mitigation, so if you go dry, you're going to be losing big bucks at Raksha. And the Zuck change to salvage drops and onyx bolts, I mean, it doesn't say how much, so I can't shape an opinion. I can, however, shape, and I have a strong opinion about this nerf in its entirety. Jagex is seemingly framing this loot nerf as necessary for the long-term health of the game, and it shouldn't have any short-term impacts, but the reality is, this change is 3, nearly 4 years too late. Players have built expectations around the Elder Goldrich dungeon bosses, they've gotten used to common drops kind of, covering their cost of PVM, because let me tell you, the cost of PVM, especially when you're learning, is very expensive. And without those common drops, bossing becomes gambling. I mean, for some bosses, it already kind of feels that way. Like, unless you're constantly farming the same boss over and over until you finish your weapon or get a rare drop, you could even be losing money. PVM setups can be really expensive. Sure, there are top players that are going to be making bank from farming bosses with good commons like Zamrak in addition to the rares, but you should not be balancing the game, especially skilling around those top PVMers. And economy-wise, like what? The Grand Exchange tax already added significant strides against inflation, if not enough. At the time, they added a higher percentage to future-proof it. Why isn't this being talked about right now? What happened to the Grand Exchange tax? Is that suddenly not enough anymore? This nerf feels like a knee-jerk reaction considering how long it took them to nerf it and with how harsh the nerf is. How can you tell your players that you're cautious about making changes, and yet you slap them in the face with a nerf like this right after Johnny introduced Barry to the game? And Barry was looking forward to doing some Arch Galasaur. F in the chat for Barry. This is the problem that Jagex runs into over and over. They release something, and then years later down the line, they think, oh, hold on a second, we need to release something new, but if it's not as good as our existing content, no one's going to do it, so we just nerf our existing content. And it's tiring and demotivating. Killing players' motivation to engage with core content is not the answer to a healthy, thriving economy. And just to be clear, I'm not against nerfs, because when they're needed, they're needed. Balance changes are part of any healthy MMO, but these nerfs are too harsh, too delayed, and they risk doing more harm than good. Now, on the topic of skilling training methods, yes, I agree there should be some more profitable methods, but the method should never match PVM or top PVM in terms of GP per hour. There's less cost, there's less risk, and it always requires less skill, and there's a lower learning curve or an easier learning curve. Now, if you want to release a skilling method that's profitable, perhaps introduce something new instead of trying to rebalance PVM, and those items that are dropped in PVM and can be used for skilling or the other way around, have it be a new item for skilling only. Look at the pitch count, look at the experimentation fire-making training method. These are profitable skilling training methods, and they aren't affected by PVM. This is the way I think about Jagex and nerfs. It's often unclear, inconsistent, and feels unfair. And that's probably because it takes them years to nerf content. Sometimes it doesn't, but usually it does. And that's completely unacceptable. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it interesting. If you did, leave a like down below, and please do let me know what you think down below as well. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.